Okay, welcome to our An Evening with conversation with Deborah and Trevor Quay. Just by way of introduction, Deborah and Trevor are good friends of ours, but they're also deep, considered, and highly experienced community workers and have been involved in the charity space and in family and community work in their local community in the UK for many, many years. They've got children. I'll let Trevor and Deborah, tell a bit more of their story, so I won't preempt it all. But I had the pleasure of working with Trevor at Man and Boy, and with Deborah, who is one of the trustees of that charity, which is a charity that works with families. And so they've had a life's work of working with families and working with men, and I'm sure that we'll get a lot out of this conversation. I'll be passing on opportunities for Trevor and Deborah to share their story, and if you've got questions, please put them in the chat. But welcome. Our next An Evening with conversation is on May the 9th, and I'll announce a little bit more about that at the end. But for now, I would like to, if you could put your hands together and welcome Trevor and Deborah Quay to be a part of our conversation this evening. And in doing that, I might just quickly read this poem, which is a poem called Coniferous Fathers by Michael Kleber Diggs. It's a little bit American, but it is a really helpful kind of conversation. Okay. I'm getting a bit of a loop, darling. I don't know if you can turn the volume down, maybe. Okay, so Coniferous Fathers by Michael Kleber Diggs. Let's fashion gentle fathers, expressive, holding us how we wanted to be held before we could ask, singing off-key lullabies written for us, songs every evening like possibilities. Fathers who say, this is how you hold a baby, but never mention a football or a cricket bat. Say nothing in that moment, just bring us to their chests naturally without shyness. Let's grow fathers from pine, not oak, coniferous fathers, raising us in their shade, fathers soft enough to bend, fathers who love us like their fathers couldn't, fathers who can talk about menstruation while playing a game of pepper in the front yard. No, take the baseball out. Let's discover a new sort, fathers as varied as and as vast as the superior forest or the Daintree rainforest. Let's kill off sternness and play down wisdom. Give us fathers of laughter and fathers who cry, fathers who say, check this out, or I'm scared, or I'm sorry, or I don't know. Give us fathers strong enough to admit they want to be near us. They've always wanted to be near us. Give us fathers desperate for something different. Not Johnny Appleseed, not even Atticus Finch. No more Rolling Stones. No more lazy boy dads reading newspapers in some other room. Let's create folklore side by side in a garden, singing psalms about abiding. Just that, abiding, being steadfast, present, evergreen, and ethereal. Let's make the old needles soft enough for us to rest on, dream on, next to them. Okay, I'm going to remove pin, and I'm going to pin Trevor and Deborah. Hang on. There we go. So wonderful. Well, thank you, Trevor and Deborah. Hopefully you can hear me okay, and we can jump in. And I've talked a little bit about how I know you. I got to start by working with the charity Man and Boy as a programs and engagement worker and running camps and courses, but you'll talk a bit more about the charity and what you do in the future. But I guess, Trevor, it would be and Deb, talk to me a little bit about your kind of experience of growing up and of being parented. Where would you like to start there, mate?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. I was born near London in the UK and to a large family. There's four boys and a girl. And it was quite a loving home, busy home. Uh, Dad was busy at work, two jobs. Mum was also busy looking after kids and then taking exams and becoming a nurse whilst raising five children. So it's quite a busy household. And at the age of 18, I joined the police, and I joined the police because during my childhood I was quite good at sport, played football, and wanted to play professionally, football meaning soccer, and then in those days that if you joined the police and you're good at some sport, you ended up playing quite a bit of that as well as doing the boring job of policing as well. So I end up at 18 in the police. That's probably my childhood. Deborah, did you want to say something? No. Okay.
I think just stick to what you want to say.
Okay.
I'll chip in later if needed.
Okay. Well, on your behalf, Deborah, we met at an early age at school. Yeah, from 16, 17 onwards. So we've known each other a long, long time. And we were married when we were 22 and had a child at 24. So shall I move on from there to I'll move on. What I'm going to do is take you in stages of my life, really, and a few things that I learned along the way. So the first thing, obviously, I'll talk about policing a bit later, but the first thing was really marriage and having a child, and that explosion of emotions and love that poured into me that I had never felt before when I had my son Thomas in 1985, and I just was in awe and just loved it and wanted to be an engaged father. And in those days, 85, that wasn't really necessarily the way that society did things. And I remember a time when I went down to the local superstore with baby and buggy and got to the checkout, and all the ladies who were behind the checkout just fussed around me and packed my bags and were just amazed that I was out with a child on my own. That was what it was like in 1985. But I knew I wanted to be involved, and I wanted to involve other men with their children more. There's something inside me that wanted to do that. So fast forward to 1989, when Thomas was 4, I took two dads away for a weekend camping, just to kind of not use toothbrushes and sort of have fun, and sort of do the boy thing in a way. I was young. I was 29, I suppose. Yeah, 29, 28 even. So that weekend of just having fun together was great. And over the next year or 3, it grew and grew. And it's still going now, 36 years later, once a year. And there are over 100 people that have come along. And it's been an organic sort of growth. So what I'd like to say around that, around fatherhood, about men, is a few things around that camp, which may or may not be of interest. But what I discovered quite early on was men need the encouragement to spend time sometimes with their fathers because they've got other commitments like work and stuff back in the day. And so I made the access to this weekend as easy as possible. So come Friday night, whenever you like, midnight if you like, but whenever you can make it, there'll be pizzas. We'll help you put your tent up. It will be cheap. We'll lend you our car if you like, but make it as easy as possible to come with your child. That's the first point I sort of would make. The second thing was to build memories, because I think we've all got memories of our fathers, good and sometimes bad, sadly. But I wanted to make those memories because I remember times with my dad playing tennis where he picked me out and we played together, just him and me. Excuse me. Ah, sorry about that. Well, not sorry about that, but it happens sometimes when you have these strong emotions. So I wanted to build those memories for fathers with their children. So that's one of the things, to have fun. And then there's role modeling and support for other men. And I was, unbeknownst to me, showing men that we can cook over the weekend. We can take care of our children over the weekend on our own, as men, as fathers. And I wasn't saying that. I didn't even realize I was doing that, but it was encouraging fathers to step into the space and do the kind of whole 360, if you like. And there were boys as well whose fathers had died. A close friend of mine's, he died and left three boys on their own. And I stepped in and others stepped in to take those boys on the camp. A, because we wanted to be role models for those boys, but B, because we didn't want those boys to miss out on what their other friends were doing. And lastly, the sort of relational thing around men, I'd say that by bringing men together on a camp, it gave men opportunity to talk to each other, just because they were there. So we didn't have to sort of contrive something particularly, but we were there, so we would talk. And often, unless a friend of mine, he said once to me that we use each other like tools in a toolbox. And so we'll go and help, we'll ask somebody to help us because they're a spanner that can help us with this or a hammer that can help us with that. And then we'll have a chat alongside it. And it often seems to be the way that we have to have an excuse, almost a practical excuse, before we can talk to each other. But this created an opportunity to talk to each other. And I've built friendships and relationships that have lasted all that time through those relationships. So back to you, Paul.
Thanks so much, Trevor. And I love that idea. It's so true that men use each other like toolboxes and say, "Oh, I need help with this." I know I do it. I think about that with. I was just about to ask my uncle today I saw him and I was going to say, "Oh, can you help me with me thing?" But I also was just glad I didn't ask him. I just went on with just catching up and talking, which was really, really nice. But yeah, it's that resource stuff that happens, and then as a way of creating then a space to keep talking. And I guess I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about your experiences with your work as well, because obviously work is really key to our experiences of being men in families, and there is a big element that's there. What was that like for you, and what did you kind of learn about? How did that kind of shape your experience or your view of what's important for men in families?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, I mean, I'd like to talk a bit about policing in London now, if that's okay. And I joined in 1979, and I retired from the police in 2009. So I did 30 years, and then 2 years extra on top of that, as a civilian within there. And so after 12 years, I became a sergeant in the police, and that means that in the UK, you're kind of in, if it's familiar territory, custody suite. You're managing the prisoners that get arrested, come to the station, and you deal with them in the police station, and you put them in cells, you get them interviewed, and you make sure they've got appropriate adults, food, doctor, and then you charge them or release them on bail or whatever. So that was my role for a few years, in probably 1990, that sort of time. And I saw a huge number of boys coming through the custody suite. In fact, I think the statistics bear that out. 90% in the UK of people in prison, inmates, are men. or boys, and 76% of prison inmates in this country don't had an absent father. So very high statistics around that. And I noticed that when the boys were being arrested and brought to the police station, mothers would turn up at 3 a.m. And bail them out or be the appropriate adult, but fathers rarely were there. And if they were there, they came in and tried to assault them rather than and tell them off rather than just to help them and support them. So I guess this was slowly filtering in me and wondering what we could do, because locking them up wasn't solving the problem, but something needed to be done. 1992, I was working in a place called Battersea, which is inner London, inner city, on an estate, quite a tough estate. And there were a group of boys who were causing a lot of trouble on the estate, causing antisocial behaviour, but also stealing cars and just the whole lot. So I decided that I would take them with my police team away to a place called Wales, which is quite rural, about five hours drive from London, and go to an outdoor centre and spend time with them. I thought that giving them another experience would really help, and making a relationship with the policemen that work with them might help too. It was a challenging time. I won't lie about that. And lots of issues came up over the weekend, and they were pushing back, and drugs and violence and stuff was happening over that weekend. But towards the end of the weekend, the boys seemed to be recognizing that there may be a need for some change in them, respecting us as people by the end of the week. And so I went back quite excited and encouraged that things might change, and I'd cracked it. Sadly, within a few hours or weeks, maybe, but a little while, all the boys just reverted back to what they were doing before. And I was very disappointed with this and couldn't work out really why this was, until I realised that the boys had been on this journey with us. They hadn't been on the journey with their father or somebody who can support them. So they didn't have somebody that could go take back to Battersea and discuss and talk about this. And also there was no one back there that can actually walk the walk with them once they got back. So it was just kind of almost like dumped back into a society that they were trying to get out of without any support. And I kind of realized that was something that if I did set up a charity, which I did, I would make sure didn't happen. So, boys were looking for male role models in my time in the police, and they didn't have one at home, so they just clearly found other boys on the estate who they looked up to. And the further they got into that, the further away from control they got from their mothers and fathers at home. Now that's the first part of the story. Should I go a little bit further in, Paul?
Yeah. Well, do you want to talk? I love that. I was just thinking of a story you told to me of the young man John who wrote a letter to you later. Do you want to just briefly share that story?
Yeah. So I in '94, which is 2 years after this, I went and was seconded out of the police to a charity in Wales again, actually, and we spent 4 months with 2 cohorts of 18 to 24-year-olds. They were boys who were in and out of trouble. They were living in Glasgow, Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool, London, and they were trying to get back into some sort of work or education. So they came away to Wales for 4 months at a time, and I was there as a kind of facilitator of this self-development program. And we lived in Wales, took the family there for a year. And this one particular lad called John, he wore black, long hair, wouldn't talk, lived in a house, but had the curtains drawn the whole time, and he was very depressed. And over time, obviously I got to know him over the 4 months, and I hadn't realised quite what the impact I had had just by getting alongside him, believing the best in him, supporting him, encouraging him. He wrote to me 10 years after, so in 2004, he wrote to me to say that because of me, he changed his life around and he got a university degree and was working for a large company. Wanted to thank me. So I guess the taking from that is that you never know what you're putting into people's lives. You know, even if I'm lucky, I heard back, but you may not hear back, but you may have made a huge difference to somebody's life by just getting alongside them and encouraging them, supporting them over those four months. Yeah, so that was a really touching experience. I've got other examples of that I could share, but I'm conscious I don't want to take up too much time. So back to you, Paul.
Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, that's amazing, and I love that idea of, you know, you don't recognize the impact that you can have by just showing up and being present and paying attention, loving, caring, you know, thinking the unconditional best of another person, and in those really hard times for young people. And it's hard to grow up, isn't it? It's like you need, where I've heard someone say, like, the strings are quite thin, where we're like one key relationship sometimes away from really either like success and or kind of survival, or, you know, like that input can be the difference between someone, you know, finding hope and and keeping on going and not. And so, you know, that message is so critical, to pay attention to the people around us. And I think that's what good parenting looks like as well, is paying attention and doing that. But I suppose it'd be interesting to know about how that kind of, your experiences with the charity, you know, being seconded to that and policing, how did that kind of lead into the next stage of what you did with your life, and what it kept, this family thing was really, and supporting men was really important to you. How did you kind of keep exploring that over the next little while?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's a few things that fall out of the experience with the charity Drive for Youth in Wales that I spent the year with. One was a building of trust. That's key, I think, to find. So being unconditional in your love for somebody, and to build that trust with them, and it gains respect to be able to then share and talk to somebody into their life. So some of these things that I've spoken about were all filtering into me, and I then had a concept idea of taking the Dads, Lads and Lasses, which is this the group I started in '89, that kind of fun weekend away, and trying to target it towards boys who were more vulnerable, maybe from disadvantaged families, chaotic family backgrounds, and didn't or would needed a bit of support from a male role model. So kind of taking the concept of those boys that we took away for a week, who went back into the estate without a father figure to support them, trying to build something where I could get referrals for boys who are struggling with life in the local schools around me, with a male in their life, and take them on a camp and see what we could do. So I started that idea, called it Man and Boy. I had some connections through my policing in the local area. So I had 10 boys referred to me, and 10 men who were father or father figures of these boys. And we went off on a camp. We played games, had fun. And I assumed that this was all that was needed, me to connect the boy with the man, give them time together, and everything will be fine. Wrong. That isn't what happened. But there were some things that that fell out of that first camp it was the year after I retired from policing, 2010, that I learned we took these 10 men down to a campsite, and within an hour of arriving there, we were sat around, the boys went and played, and one of the men just burst into tears and started talking about his life and how terrible it was, and he couldn't cope anymore. And all of my team just faded away and left me to chat to this guy. And we just didn't. It was just out of the blue, and I've thought around that, and it was that man had never had a chance with other men to open himself up. He must have felt some sort of safety with us, but he never shared this stuff before, and just opened up. And I thought, that's something I need to take account of if this is going to go forwards. I also thought at the end of the weekend, we need more purpose in this. It's not just about fun and a camp. We need to have a purpose within it, taking the men and boys on a journey of discovery. Another one I learned was over the next couple of years was I thought the biological father was what was needed in all these cases. And so I did strive to bring them along rather than the stepfather or uncle or grandfather. But I soon learned after a father who was a drug addict had let his boy down on the Friday night going on camp several times, and so he couldn't come, that this was not necessarily the best in every case, and a good role model may be better than a father that's constantly letting a boy down, which was a hard lesson for me to learn, actually, because I didn't think that. I thought always that the connection was with a biological father, therefore that's the one we should work with. But I found also that stepfathers and uncles can be fantastic. I mean, obviously, for boys who don't have a father, then they step in. But also, stepfathers that have come, one in particular, he came thinking that he wanted to be this boy's father, and the boy was rejecting him a lot of the time and pushing him away and wanting his dad, who was just not turning up and this sort of stuff, idolizing his father and hating his stepfather. And because his father had another son, a biological son, who loved him, and they had this loving relationship, he wanted the same for the stepson. And this, he realized over the camp that he needs to reposition himself, really, because the expectation on a boy to love a stepfather as a father was too much. But the stepfather could be of huge help and support as a role model, a supporter, an encourager, a male figure in this boy's life. And once this stepfather had worked that one out, he could then approach his relationship in a different way, and it starts to flourish. So, and the other thing, just to bring out from this one camp, at the end of the camp, the dads turned to me and said, "You're not just leaving us now, are you? Just to go back on our own. We need more. What have you got, Trevor?" So we created a program that lasts 12 to 18 months. So we can journey with the men and the boy, not just on the camp, but over the next 18 months to help them solidify any changes that they want to make in their lives. So that's the next part of what I wanted to say, Paul. I guess the last bit would be about man and boy and the kind of creation that is now.
Yeah, thanks. That's super helpful. Deb, did you have any reflections or any of that things that have popped up for you as you've been going through? I really value your input, and Deborah's been along this journey the whole way. You could probably talk about that more than I could, for sure.
I don't know where you want to take it from here, Paul, but in some ways, I think hearing Trevor's story and maybe some of the conversations we had at the beginning of your session will have sort of stimulated some thoughts and questions and reflections. And I think that the main thing is hearing the different. Start again. As a family therapist, I work with a lot of families, and it's so complex what we bring into our lives and what we have to navigate and negotiate. Somebody in our group talked about how do I navigate how to be a father today, which is so different to what it was, what the expectations were, in past bygone years. And there isn't a simple answer. There is no straightforward answer, is there, to that, how to be. And so your question of this evening was, does fatherhood matter? Then clearly Trevor and I think, well, yes, of course it matters. Fatherhood matters. You make so much difference you can make so much difference positively and negatively to the young people, your own children and other people's children. But we have to navigate it in our own way. And what will influence how we navigate it is our own experience of being fathered, positive or negative, helpful or unhelpful. What we believe, the beliefs we have about how we should be as a man or as a woman, what our role should be. So I wonder whether it'll be helpful to have more of a dialogue between everybody about what maybe their struggles are, or how they want to be, off the back of those questions. I can just add that, obviously I have journeyed with Trevor through this, and my own relationship with my own father was and is, he's 87, very, very important to me, but he was a very, very typical man that wasn't around a lot when I was growing up. But I still as a girl and as a young woman, and actually now as an old woman, seek his approval and his for him to be interested in me, that that I still want to be significant to him. And we all have that as human beings, the need to be significant and valued. And that's what builds our self-worth, isn't it? So yeah, I mean, I think there's so much that can be said, but it's up to you where you take this now, Paul.
Oh, thanks, Deb. Oh, that was such a beautiful little summary, and I really appreciate your reflections. And it's important to think of that. Of our whole lives, we spend our lives wanting to connect and be seen and be heard and be valued and be loved, and that often those parental figures are so significant, and you're right, they do that and they don't do that. The experience is often, if we're lucky, we've had significant experiences of love and acceptance and recognition and positive regard, but also each of us carries wounds where we haven't experienced that, or that we've experienced it in its absence, and we're searching for those affirmations or that kind of connection. And I think I really loved and appreciated that kind of flip that you were able to do, where you recognize that that's been a part of your experience of being a daughter, and your relationship with your parent and your parents, and how that's kind of influenced and shaped the way in which you've probably parented your children together. Is there anything you wanted to say about that, to kind of tie that in?
So in the way that we've parented our children, so Trevor and I have 3 grown-up children, and we have nearly 6 grandchildren, one about to be born, I think, in the next couple of days. So that's really exciting for us. Our journey has been, well, so I was a sort of stay-at-home mum. Although I had a degree, I chose to stay at home. We together chose to do that. I don't know that we'd have that economic choice these days. I think one of the challenges of parenthood, never mind fatherhood, is working and bringing up children, and as Trevor said earlier, sorting out childcare, how you do that. But that definitely, I had strong beliefs about, I wanted to look after my children. But I don't know that my daughters have that freedom of choice now to do that. But it made a big difference to us in how we in how we developed our struggles. There was only one book on parenting when we started our parenting, Dr. Spock, I think it was, in 1 or 2 books. And now if you go into the library or if you go into a bookshop, there are hundreds of different parenting books, all telling you different things, slightly different variations. And that's a huge struggle, I think, for parents today, that who do you follow? How do you make decisions about how you parent? And something that we do in our dad's group is we think about, we don't teach how to parent. We ask people to start to think about what they're doing and what their values are and what is it that they want to pass on to their children. And if what they're doing is not working, we ask them to do something different. So we try to take a non-expert position, and that's been influenced because we know the mistakes that we made with the best of intentions and wanting to get it right, that we know that there's no one perfect way to parent or to be a father or to be a mother. So our own experiences feed into also what research shows us. But for dads, I think there's a particular struggle of I don't know, maybe you can put me right, as men, that it's often your primary identity is as a provider, material provider, as in your jobs. And so your parenting identity can come along afterwards. And that's the struggle to try and make it. How do you balance both? I think it's becoming more of a problem for women now, because it's difficult to have it all.
Yeah.
And I'm conscious that I'm sort of drifting onto a different subject now, but yeah, so that's our experience as parents has definitely molds us and has molded us in our decisions and desire to see mums and dads supported in their role and children grow in love and significance and self-worth.
Yeah, thanks. That's really helpful, Deborah. Thank you. Trev, did you have anything you wanted to follow up there on that, or where would you add? I asked about you and parenting, and
yeah, I not really. I think you said it all, Deb. And it was a struggle. It has been a struggle for us. It's not been easy, because we're learning as we go along as parents. So yeah, we're still not perfect. Yeah, but That's nothing more to add. No.
Yeah, thank you. Trev, you were keen, I suppose, and maybe what I was hoping that you might be able to talk about is, like, we're thinking about working with men and encouraging men in that kind of parental process, and and in kind of the Centre for Men and Families, we try and create space where men can share and be honest and to let down the mask. And I suppose you've seen or experienced some of those learnings about what helps men to be real or to kind of open up, or be able to support each other as men. What maybe advice or kind of learning have you had that might be helpful for anybody who was kind of wanting to support parents or men in particular with kind of that deeper reflection on their parental journey?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. If I can use Man and Boy as a template for that, which is the charity that was founded in 2013, that's still going, and Paul was a part of. One key thing for men was on that particular camp, which is boys and men, was to separate the boys from men and give the men a chance to talk about themselves. I find that men need to be given an opportunity to talk together with other men, and they often don't find themselves in that position because they don't put themselves there. But we on the Man and Boy camp give them 3 opportunities over the weekend to say what brought them to the camp and where they'd like some support. And so following on from that, what men find is that by sharing, if you can lead them to share a little bit, they find that they're not alone. They're not the only ones. Actually, there are other people out there experiencing the same sort of thing, and that brings them some sort of comfort and support that they're not alone and they're not on their own, and others will support them. But there's a need to sort of almost like coach them into that position. So over the weekend as well with Man and Boy, we create as well a safe space. So there are men there that are the team that kind of hold the space in a, I would say, assertive way, but it's a gentle way, it's a supportive way. We're not judgmental, but it seems like the men have often said that they just felt that we just weren't even there, but they felt safe within this environment. Perhaps because we all come with some experience and knowledge and some confidence in who we are, to hold the space of men and boys, know they're safe to play, have fun, do what they want, talk, not talk. That the environment is quite important on in the man and boy sense, to give them that. And then I think it's about role modeling and mentoring. So you need to gain people's trust for sure, but we as a team would role model encouraging each other, supporting each other, helping each other, asking about each other, being kind to each other. And it's kind of rubs off on the others around. And so we created as well a theme for the weekend called the Tube of Encouragement. It's about encouragement, and we have a big tube in the middle of the session with balls that you can fill with encouragements that you've seen somebody encourage somebody else. If you see somebody encouraging somebody, then you bring it to that circle and you say it out loud, and that person that's done the encouraging puts the ball into the tube. And we find that changes the dynamic in the atmosphere and into a more supportive, encouraging environment. I'm not quite hitting what you asked for, but it's kind of the key elements to what helps the men and the boys open up over a weekend, and then towards the end of the weekend we give them a series of questions to ask to each other, which Deborah helped to create, which just gently take some of the lid off of their relationship. They ask each other who their best friend was growing up, what their favorite songs were. Then it leads into some slightly more interesting questions about any issues or challenges they may face, and they ask it to each other. So the boy asks the man asks the boy. So it's a very equitable conversation. And I am amazed. A lot of the men come back and they'd never had a conversation with their boys, and they didn't know the stuff that the boy told them. Yet over 2 days, by creating this atmosphere and this feeling of safety for the boy and the man, they are able to have a conversation that gives them the substance to start a change in their lives. And that's where we can help them to do that, because Rome wasn't built in a day. It doesn't happen over one weekend. Change just takes time. And we recognize that, and so that's why we journey alongside, as you know, Paul, you've done it with men and boys over a year, 2 years, 3 years, to help them.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Trev. And I think, that encouragement piece is so essential, and the practice of noticing what is going on, and what you feed, you grow. Like, it's almost like the things that you plant, that ability to pay attention to what is going on. And I think that's something that is so critical for for every relationship, that your ability to pay attention and to notice and bring to life the things that you can breathe life into things, or you can suck air out of it, can't you, with our words and our attention, I suppose. And I just affirm that in what you've done with your work and what you've done in your parenting, both of you. Thank you. I wanted to see, we've had a lot of talking. I wonder if there's other questions that might be sitting. I might unpin for the moment, Trevor and Deborah, so that we can have a bit more of an open conversation for a little bit. What has anyone got any questions or reflections or thoughts for Trevor and Deborah, or reflections on your own parental journey, or things that you're still wondering about or want to kind of discuss? The floor is open. Feel free to just jump in, come off mute, and
I've got my screen blank because I'm kind of parenting at the same time here.
That's fine, Dad.
How important is, you obviously, big part of Centre for Men is we get men out in nature. How important is nature, obviously, to what you do? And do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Deborah, do you want to talk, or shall I?
No, I'll add if you start. I'll add.
Yeah. Oh, it's very important. Is the answer. I remember, this is one example of, we go camping in the summer, and we have log cabins that we go into in the winter time, because it's just too cold in the UK for camping then, for some. And I remember one situation, the boys have experiencing new things, camping under a canvas, sleeping next to your father, waking up early because it's light, going in a lake and doing all these new experiences are very valuable to the children and to the men, actually. But one particular one, a man and boy slept in the camp together, in the tent together, and on the second night, they got out, and the dad said, the boy gave me a cuddle. He's never cuddled me before. Cuddled me before. And it was such an amazing moment for the father and the son to connect. And I guess part of that is because they were in a different environment, in a tent, no other distractions, and it was natural.
Yeah, I think that it's really, there's two things, isn't it? There's getting away from wherever you live, and we happen to live in London, so it's, we do have some lovely parks, but it's not quite the same as getting out into the countryside. But we know that nature and being in touch with the plants, the trees, that being outside is good for your spirit, good for your soul, good for your well-being. And walk and talk is definitely taken off in the UK. I don't know whether it has in Australia, but walk and talk therapy, it's often much easier to talk if you're walking along. Just being outside is good. And the physicalness of raft building and archery and all the climbing, all the other things is good for boys and for girls, for mums and dads. We just tend to work with the dads and dads and boys, but it definitely is a bonus. And I had one or two really deep and meaningful conversations on the man and boy camps, where the boy and the dad were too frightened to do the climbing. They basically were the focus was on the boy being too anxious to climb, but actually dad was very, 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 very anxious. And so we just went off for a walk along through the New Forest and chatted, and it was really, I think they would say it was really helpful for them to be able to separate out the boy's anxiety from the dad's anxiety, and then think about anxiety as being a problem that was sort of separate from both of them, that they could then work with, because the boy was being labelled in a big way, but that's being exposed to those challenges, and then being exposed to be able to have the space to go and walk outside, walk across the moorland was really a good environment to have those conversations, rather than sitting down and having a therapy session, eyeballing each other, which is not always what people want or feel comfortable with.
Yeah, I think of, just to jump in, I think of all those opportunities that you give for men and boys to have those conversations and ask some questions together. They were often encouraged to do a walk or go and have an explore, and to do those in a way that was safe for them. And a lot of men would come back and say, oh, yeah, like you say, I never had this opportunity to have a chat like this. And it was the fact that they were out in a low stakes kind of environment where they could actually have a conversation and appreciate stuff together like that nature became a kind of safe space for them to open up. And I just think some of those conversations where we've heard men and boys who've said, oh, I said stuff that I'd never said before, and it was something about just being out of their kind of distracted world and tuning into each other, and that was really helpful. Yeah. Thanks, Dan. That was a helpful question. Does anyone have any follow-ups or other questions about think about the wide range of topics that we've kind of looked at already tonight? Emmanuel, you've come off mute, so I wondered, maybe do you have something you wanted to ask? Or?
Yeah, I had to unpack. I did the rights in 2019. I had to unpack my dad not saying to me that he loves me. That was something that it took me the whole week at the rights to unpack until recent. So I live in Brisbane. My parents live in Perth. We don't always see each other, although we try our best to go to Perth and vice versa, fair distance. I think not up until recently. I think it might have been even Christmas this year just gone. I think, and maybe one other time that I saw him last year, that we flew to Perth, that he said that he loved me. But up until that, he never said that to me. So, yeah, something that I had to unpack, think about how that made me feel.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering whether his dad had ever said he loved him.
Well, his dad, my pop or grandfather, whatever you want like to call him, was, to us grandkids, he was around, but he didn't really make an effort to interact with us. So, yeah, it sounds like it's generational to me from what you're just saying. But yeah, I remember one time my pop was like, "Oh, you're too loud," or something like that, and that's all he said to us. There was not much other communication apart from that. Yeah. I think it probably sort of started back maybe 2 generations or something. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's something that we think about a lot when we do our course with our dads here, where I work, and we think about what we want to do the same and what we want to do differently to the way that our fathers or our mothers looked after us, and but also that we have to think with compassion about what the times that they lived in and what was okay, what was different back then, and we work with a lot of different cultures too, and there are different expectations in different cultures, and for some, there's a belief about not bearing your emotions, or not even if your father or mother hasn't said that they love you, and my father has never said he loved me, but I know he loves me. But he doesn't say much about anything about feelings, about anything really. And I can look back and think, and I know that he was evacuated during the war, that his own parents were separated, which was quite unusual in those days, and all sorts of other things go on. So we don't look back. Well, I try not to look back with judgment, but I want to do something going forward, different for my own children, and it's a journey that we're all on.
Yeah.
But dealing with the hurt and dealing and knowing the pain that we go through when we don't feel good enough or loved or whatever, that's our own personal sort of work, isn't it, that we have to do. Yeah,
that's a bit of a journey that, like I said, that took me the whole week to sort of unpack.
Thanks, Emmanuel, for opening up on a really significant part of your experience, and feeling with you, and on that. Without pivoting too much, was there other questions or reflections? I love that, what you're saying, Deborah, about thinking. We tend to kind of assess things very quickly and come to conclusions and write things off, when I think one of the themes that has come out of our conversation is there's no one way of parenting, and that it is a complex thing, and there's always going to be some disconnects with there's no perfect parent, there's no perfect connection where one kid is loved perfectly by one parent. It hopefully is a consistent kind of attachment where there is a sense of security and a sense of safety and love, but it doesn't mean there's no kind of wounds or pain or misunderstanding. I suppose I'm interested in how you were talking about the thinking forwards, like how do I flip to thinking about what I can do as a parent in the future. From I hope to be a parent one day, and I wonder what that might look like for myself and Lizzie, and that creative kind of work that is catalyzing or taking some of that the gold and the dust of kind of, or the pain of your own experience of being parented, and reimagining that. What have you learnt together about that process over the last little while of it's a tough question to answer. But what are some things that has become bedrocks maybe of your own kind of parental practice that you've kind of come to together, or that you've really would kind of, if you lift the lid on your roles as parents, what would you say these are the things that I've we've really learnt together that has helped us? Or
I'm going to fob you off, Paul, really. Is that all right?
sure, fob me.
Well, I think thinking about that is that we're whichever part of the river we're in, that's the bit that we're having to deal with right now, right? And I'm having to learn how to be a grandparent, a grandmother, a granny, or a grandma, or a nana. I don't know what you call that
All
role
of the
in
above. They're
Australia.
All of the above.
And you have to know yourself. And the more you know yourself, the more you know your weaknesses as well as your strengths. And my weakness is balanced out by one of my many weaknesses is balanced out by one of Trevor's strengths, which is I'm quite quick to react, and I feel things very strongly, and I can react without thinking. And Trevor's much calmer, more placid, more peaceful, and more thoughtful in the sense that he can take his time. And so we do complement each other in a way, but he can slow me down, and that's helpful for me. But I know that about myself, so I've learned that. And when I have a reaction to something and I'm feeling it very strongly, to sit with it for a while and to try and work out what's going to think. Just to think rather than just be in the emotion. Because the emotions can drive us. And that's what we bring to going back to our parenting goals, helping people to slow down and think and notice what's going on, what happens, what is the pattern. Because generally there's patterns in the way that we react, whether it's with our spouses, our ex-spouses, whether it's with the children or our grandchildren or our grown-up children and their partners. There's all these patterns that go on, and if we can look at the pattern and work out what bit we're playing in it, then we can do something a bit different. So slowing down and thinking, I think, is what I've learned.
Yeah, I like that, Deb. But I think we are at a different place in our lives, and so we have different challenges than when we were bringing up the children. So it does change, but staying connected with our children, staying connected with our grandchildren, not repeating the patterns that we want, which might just make us feel better because they did this, we'll do that, or something. But believing the best in people and your children and your grandchildren and their partners, is similar to what you're saying, I think, Deb. But
I like that, believing the best. And we're not actually part of a religious community at the moment, but we were when we were younger. And some of the values that we hold dear, like believing the best and forgiveness, being able to forgive people and to let things go, things like that come from some of our previous associations, if you like, with our religion. But I think it's also worth, because we do a lot of that on our course as well. We talk about ask the guys what their values are that are dear to them, and often people haven't thought about that, and they haven't thought about it at all. So actually, or they may say one thing but do another. So we've got to kind of get our beliefs in line with what our actions are, make the two marry together. But yeah, I think it's really important for me that what you've just said, Trevor, to believe the best in each other before, because it's quick. We can be quick to judge, quick to be critical, quick to notice what the child's doing wrong, or whoever it is doing wrong, but actually bringing to the foreground what they're doing right and noticing that, to pick up on your point earlier, Paul, noticing what's going well. And that's one of the questions we ask in our parenting group that we run. What's gone well what's been different this week that's gone well that you've been pleased to notice? And so we're really focusing on the things that are joys and blessings, and that really helps too.
Any other questions that are sitting out there? Chris, you're off mute, so I wonder if you have a question, but I don't know if you have a question, so I don't feel pressured.
No, not really. I guess I just took your invitation before to have it off mute to feel a bit more part of the conversation. But as a grandparent now, I can understand a lot of what you're saying with that. It takes you to a different place when you because you see so many things in your kids that reflect your own your own faults and mistakes that you've made along the way. They come back to to challenge you, and then you have this opportunity with grandchildren. We only have one little grandy. Oh, if we had 6, what a wonderful time that would be. But one's pretty exciting too. She's 4.5, but in another country. So that's challenging. But one thing that what you're talking about took me back to was of a movie I saw some time back about, it's just called Absent. I don't know if you've seen that one. It was done on the absent father. Very powerful and had some really good interviews in it, but just basically 2 key things that the guy presented, who had a little girl himself, was how powerful it is what the father does in saying of a young boy, letting the boy know that he's good enough. Just that simple concept, you're good enough. And for his daughters, that they were beautiful and special to him. So just different expressions of the same kind of thing, but and the stories of people that were interviewed were just so powerful in affirming that, and how much understanding that helped them. For me, it's been a long journey. My dad didn't, he was an emotionally distant father. And I understand more of that now because he didn't know a father. There's no name on the birth certificate. My surname is my grandmother's maiden name. A good old English name, Foot, or Foot, as they would probably say over there, Mr. Foot. But he was emotionally distant from me because I understood I was grown up being part of a church community, but my mum and dad both came under conviction, I understand, before I was born, but my dad never identified, but encouraged my mum to be part of that. And one of my sisters said that the reason was that he was always making excuses to avoid situations where there'd be groups of people and someone would say, "Oh, where do you come from?" "Oh, he came from Gisborne, New Zealand." I'm a Kiwi, which I just gave away then. But he'd be afraid that the next question then would be, "Oh, Gisborne, oh, what was your dad's name?" He was just afraid of having to not have an answer to that. And so he just became, in a lot of ways, and insular in not being able to relate to me because I went through church. I was a pastor, but that made that even more difficult for him to be able to connect. And for me now to look back to my dad, I just look back. I've developed a love for my dad. No, I've developed a real love for my dad because of understanding his journey, a lot of forgiveness of him. I didn't get a chance to be able to talk to him before he died. Yeah, just interesting. Understand many things about his journey. I think he'd hoped that he would go and serve in the Second World War. He enlisted, was a dispatch rider in New Zealand, and then one dark night rode into the inky blackness, taking a message to the next camp, and hit a herd of black Aberdeen Angus bulls that were on the road. And it just about killed him, and that ended up him being discharged from the army. So probably a bit of a sense of defeat, not being able to be who he wanted to be. And when I came along as the last of 6 kids, a surprise package 12 years after the other, there was really a disconnect. And it's been a long journey just coming to understand that and to be able to see how that's given me emotional buttons that are very easy to trigger of feeling unworthy, and finding my worthiness in ways, and for me, in my relationship with God, but also just an understanding who I am. Yeah, sorry, that was a long, and it wasn't a question, but that was those things were all flooding into my mind as I heard you guys talking, and I really appreciate that. The work you've been doing that with man and boy.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, it strikes me that it reminds me of what we were saying about the context, really, and not if you don't know the whole picture, then it's probably best not to judge. Probably best to bleed the best.
Yeah,
because there's probably more to
I
it.
don't even know. I don't even know the whole story. You know, in my journey, it's still a jigsaw puzzle coming together. So
yeah,
who can look at you? You know, who can look at me and say, "Oh yeah, I've got you sussed out." And I'm married, like you are. I'm married to a relationship therapist. My wife's a counsellor. So, and she's been trying to work out her story too, which is often why what people who are therapists either get into it or do for the rest of their life. Anyway, I appreciate. Thanks for the input, and good to be part of the community tonight.
Yeah,
thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I wonder if there's any last comments or questions. I'm conscious of our time, and we've had a really wonderful chance to dig into this stuff, and I feel like you're just pulling back the tiniest corner of what is a tapestry of kind of art of relationships and parenting and of families, of what it is to grow up. And it's this, you know, just like there's no one way of parenting, there's no you can't exhaust the conversation of what it is to think about, you know, how being born and raised and what that does to us, and how it shapes us, and the kind of the art and heart and the wound and the gift of all of that work, I think is quite fascinating. And it's deep stuff. And I love also your invitation, Deborah, to kind of pay attention to what's going on for you and this space. And if only the one thing that's come for me is like to just pay attention, think about how was I parented, and how was I what are those forces that have kind of shaped me as an individual, and how do I bring that forth in healthy, whole ways, rather than necessarily just you know, Richard Rohr has this phrase. He says that anything that is not transformed gets transferred, and I think that's a true thing for parenting as much as it is for any other aspect of our lives. And so I'm really encouraged to do that. Was any other kind of comments or final kind of reflections or questions from anyone in our time together tonight?
Around me that they're watching.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, hi, Steve.
Hey, this is Lisa.
I'm Lisa. Hi.
Hey, Lisa. How are you?
Lisa.
Thanks for joining us.
Good. I kind of can mirror some of the stories of Deborah, Trevor, and Chris. My dad's a minister, so I grew up around the church, and in that, for me, a really unconditionally loving environment. But when you were talking before, Paul, and you asked a question about how to prepare for that stage of parenting, one of the things that I have found really valuable is knowing that we won't always get it right. And as a parent, I remember being a teenager, and I went through mental health problems and had depression. And my dad said to me one day, "You need to be mad at me. You need to be okay to be angry at me for the things that I did that didn't meet your standard." And now as a parent, I have that kind of philosophy with my kids where I'm like, I'm comfortable that even though I'm going to do my best, there are things my daughter and my son are going to look at me and go, "Mum, you messed up." And that you can love them and you can do the best you can, as I know my parents did. But we will miss the mark sometimes. And forgiving yourself is part of the journey too. So compassion for yourself And then when you reflect and you look at your parents and you say, yeah, you messed up, I can love you at the same time as feeling disappointed. And learning that those two things can coexist is really powerful.
Yeah. Good.
His words.
Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a pretty strong and safe note to end on. I think Trevor and Deborah and everyone who's been a part of this conversation tonight, I just want to say a huge thank you. It's not easy stuff to talk about it, and it brings up lots of different emotions, and there's probably lots of stuff that each of us can take away and think about. And yeah, if anything does come up, don't be afraid to reach out to somebody or seek out support, because yeah, these are big things of our lives. Yeah, I just want to say a big thank you for everyone for your willingness to kind of get involved and be a part of the conversation, and for the ways in which people have shared deeply. Thank you for that. It's really deepened our conversation together. And I also want to say a really huge thank you to Trevor and Deborah for joining us from across the pond, and for your work and love in Lizzie and my life over the last 5 years, and for your work and life, and that legacy of paying attention and of wanting to make a difference in people's lives, in families. And I'm certain that I know lots of stories of families who've had significant changes and more hopeful outlooks from the involvement in the work that you guys have done in your respective charities. And so I just want to, say a big thank you, and just wish you every good thing as you keep up this work, and that you haven't kind of hit the retirement point and said, well, we'll just do something. What about something else? You've kind of continued that work. So thank you.
Thank you for inviting us, Paul. It's been really nice to meet everybody. Yeah. And hopefully we'll come over to Australia one day.
Well, yeah, you'll have to come, and we'll have you out and get to meet the community in person. And who knows what the future has in store there. But thank you, everyone. And just a final kind of reminder that we'll continue these conversations, and they're open to people near and far. Maybe we'll get Deb and Trevor on again just to kind of come and say hello. But our next one is on May the 9th. We're back all locked in, no daylight saving, so 7 p.m. And it will be a conversation with Richard Fay, who many of you know through the Centre for Men and Families. And he will be talking about grief. So we've gone from parenting to grief, two very
sounds like a pretty logical progression to me.
and they're not deep conversations at all either.
You die.
Diving right in. So thank you. Thanks everyone for coming. Hopefully we'll see you at another conversation soon. I'm going to stop the recording now. Reach out if you've got any questions about that. But yeah, thank you everyone. I'll stick around for a little bit.
Thank you.
But, we'll see you down the road. Thanks.
Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you very
Bye bye.
much.
Thank you, Chris.